Good afternoon. My name is Samira Allure, and these are my colleagues,
Shravan Arun.
Today, we will be presenting our project, Escaping the Cycle of Sudden Cardiac Arrest. Escaping stands for Ending Sudden Cardiac Arrest of Patients by Innovating and Gaining Awareness. Sudden cardiac arrest occurs when the heart stops beating suddenly. The lack of blood flow to the brain and other organs can lead to a variety of side effects such as loss of consciousness, disability, and death. Although there are well over 500,000 cases of sudden cardiac arrest yearly, there's still a lack of awareness on proper prevention and treatment, which is why it's such a prevalent issue that needs to be addressed. Before we get into prevention and treatment, it's important to understand the causes of sudden cardiac arrest, which is what my colleague Ria will be talking about.
Thank you, Samira. 2%. That is the rate of survival for those who encounter sudden cardiac arrest. It accounts for a staggering number of deaths every year in the US and is only on the rise. Underlying conditions that the general population pay no mind to make people even more likely to be at risk for such a devastating condition, which is why we must discuss its causes. Hypertension, or high blood pressure, is defined as a blood pressure level of 140/90, with the normal range being less than or equal to 120/80. Those with hypertension can expect the risk of sudden cardiac arrest to double, with there being a 28% increase in risk for each 20 millimeter increment in systolic blood pressure. Even more so, the epidemic of obesity in American citizens is rising very quickly. Being one of the biggest ailments leading to the development of other diseases, obesity leads to a spike in hypertension risk, with 1 in 2 adults in the US having the condition, amounting to a total of 116 million people. This astounding quantity helps contribute to the growing number of cases of sudden cardiac arrest due to underlying conditions, most notably being coronary artery disease and congestive heart failure. Essentially, the higher rates of obesity are directly linked to the development of prominent cardiac diseases that increase sudden cardiac arrest risk, making hypertension a very important component in the treatment for the sudden cardiac death epidemic. Additionally, however, hypertension risk is 2 times higher in patients with diabetes. Diabetes mellitus, which can be split up into both type 1 and type 2, is categorized as too much sugar in the blood, otherwise known as high blood glucose. The presence of diabetes mellitus increases the risk of sudden cardiac death by 4 times, which is double the risk than for hypertension. With diabetes becoming more and more commonplace, this epidemic is simultaneously linked to the rise in sudden cardiac death cases, stressing the need for a raise in awareness for them both. However, while the general population as a whole can be affected by diabetes, postmenopausal women, or women who are at the end of their menstrual cycle, heart failure patients, and/or those who've undergone congestive heart failure are all at elevated risk, which is why they should be especially targeted. Similar to hypertension, diabetes also paves the path for the development of coronary artery disease, which is defined as the blockage of arteries due to the buildup of fat on the artery walls. This allows for the collection of blood in the heart, which can lead to hypertension and thus can make diabetes worse. In addition, diabetes can also cause congestive heart failure, which has death rates of up to 50% due to cardiac arrest, making diabetes a very important factor to consider for the extensive effects of sudden cardiac arrest. To discuss the overall understanding of the treatment and diagnosis for this pandemic, my colleague Shravan will elaborate further.
Thank you, Ria. Sudden cardiac arrest occurs so fast that in the moment we are unable to recognize it until a person goes unconscious and hits the floor. However, we can definitely take a look at what leads to such a deadly event. Today I'll be discussing the diagnosis and treatment for sudden cardiac arrest, starting off with hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. Let's break down the 2 words independently. Hypertrophic comes from the word hypertrophy, which is signified as abnormal growth and enlargement. Cardiomyopathy is defined as a disease of the heart muscle. Hypertrophic cardiomyopathy can be classified as left ventricular stiffness, mitral valve changes, and an enlarged septum. Stiffness leads to the left ventricle unable to properly fill, and therefore diastole isn't able to occur, which finally leads to a decrease in blood pressure. Mitral valve changes occur because since the pathway of blood out of the left ventricle is narrowed, the mitral valve hits the septum, which causes mitral valve regurgitation. Cardiomyopathy plays a huge role in the prevalence of sudden cardiac arrest, but we also have to pay attention to arrhythmias. An arrhythmia is an irregular heartbeat that causes the heart to beat too slow or too fast. The 2 arrhythmias I'll be discussing today are ventricular tachycardia and ventricular fibrillation. Ventricular tachycardia is defined as irregular electrical signals that occurs in the ventricles. The heart rate is 100 or more beats per minute. Ventricular fibrillation is defined as chaotic electrical signals that occur in the ventricles. The rate is around 300 to 400 beats per minute, as we can see in this EKG. Both these arrhythmias can be identified in an EKG, and action can be taken to prevent the sudden cardiac arrest. Now, let's take a look at treatment. Beta blockers are a very common treatment option for sudden cardiac arrest. Beta blockers prevent adrenaline from making contact with beta receptors. Adrenaline is a stress hormone produced by the adrenal glands, and it is a part of the fight or flight response, which triggers your nervous system. A release of adrenaline causes an elevated blood pressure and an increase in heart rate. With the use of beta blockers, the heart is caused to beat slower and with less force, which then allows for diastole. Now we have an ICD. The ICD is also known as an implantable cardioverter defibrillator, which is implanted under the skin below the collarbone. The ICD consists of leads that are usually placed on the right ventricle. The ICD leads are placed on the right side of the heart because if they're placed on the left side, this will heavily increase stroke risk and cause clots, which will kill the patient. This piece of technology is so unique because it can sense whether the heart is beating too slow or too fast and can deliver a shock to return the heart to a normal heart rhythm. Now I'll pass it on to my colleague Samira to discuss our app and our solution.
Thank you, Shravan. There are around 180 to 300,000 sudden cardiac arrest deaths yearly. However, almost 1/3 of those can be prevented with the use of an AED. AED stands for Automated External Defibrillator, and it's a medical device that analyzes the heart's rhythm and, when necessary, delivers an electrical shock or defibrillation to help reestablish an effective rhythm. When cardiac arrest occurs, survival chances decline by 7 to 10% each minute that defibrillation is delayed, which is why it's so important to have easy accessibility and proper knowledge on the device. Various reasons why an AED is not used during an emergency is because 1, they are unfamiliar with the device and its use, 2, they fear worsening the conditions of the patient and being held liable, and 3, most importantly, lack of an accessible AED during the emergency. That being said, our goal is to increase AED use through expanding user comfortability and knowledge on the device. With this goal, our team designed and developed the app AED by Me. The app prompts the user to input their current location and utilizes that data to display SCARF AEDs in their proximity and the hours that they are available for use. For example, in this building, if an individual was to go into cardiac arrest, a bystander would first open the app, then input their current location using either the search bar or the white button in the bottom right corner, which allows them to see their current location on the map. They're also able to see pins that mark SCARF AED locations. Once they click on a pin near them, a pop-up shows up at the bottom right of the corner, at the bottom of the screen, which allows them to see the location of the AED, the hours that the AED is available for use, and the exact distance the user is from the AED. While the app improves accessibility to currently existing AEDs, we are simultaneously working on our public service campaign to help gain awareness about the importance of reducing the number of sudden cardiac deaths. We are doing this by connecting with local businesses, such as hotels, and collaborating with them to place SCARF AEDs in their locations. The average EMS response time nationwide is about 4 to 10 minutes. Like I said before, survival chances decline by 7 to 10% each minute that defibrillation is delayed. This means that if EMS was to take 4 minutes to reach the patient, their odds of survival have already reduced by 28 to 40%. Another study shows that cardiac arrest victims who received a shock by a publicly available AED administered by a bystander had 2.62 times higher odds of survival. All of this data contributes to why the primary goal of our public service campaign is to increase the accessibility and use of AEDs during emergencies. As we discussed, there are various reasons why an AED is not used during an emergency. However, one that we focused on was the AED being inaccessible because the facility that it is located in is closed. The peak risk hours for cardiac arrest range from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. Most public facilities are closed during these hours, which is why we aim to place these SCARF AEDs in locations open 24/7 to make them more available. Additionally, we plan to hold training for CPR certifications so that staff in these buildings can aid in case of a sudden cardiac arrest where an AED may be necessary. Additionally, during the CPR course that we plan to hold, we would also educate the staff on what an AED does to prevent unfamiliarity with the device or fear of use during the emergency.
As you can see, sudden cardiac arrest is deadly and has a devastating impact on those around us. And our team is working on combating these issues by providing a long-lasting and innovative solution. Now, will you join us in escaping the cycle of sudden cardiac arrest?